Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the fantastic Ann Skelly, currently starring in the HBO series The Nevers. And the first thing that I was really fascinated by with this series is the mix of genres and the conversations that happened very early on about how to bring each of them in. Because when you look at it, you've got the supernatural element, you've also got the fact that it's a period piece, and then you have these two central characters where it's almost like a buddy detective piece as well at the same time. And so what were those early conversations about, thinking about how you could pull in all these different genres into the overarching story, but also into your performance?
Yeah, I've never done sci-fi before, so it's been a totally new addition to anything I've been used to. So I'll start with the Penance and Amalia relationship, I suppose, because that was one of the, I think, biggest factors of me being cast. Even is my second audition was with Laura herself, and from there, I just got it, and that was probably the easiest and quickest audition process I've ever had in my life, which was kind of mad because it's also the biggest show I've ever even auditioned for in my life. So that was bonkers. But it was, the relationship between Amalia and Penance was very much sold to me as like a Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but Victorian times. And I think it's been a lot of fun to play because Laura is so easy to act with, and to kind of have that dynamic with, because it is quite true to us in real life in a lot of ways. The sci-fi elements of it is actually not the strangest part about the show. I feel like sometimes it's been I think quite a similar feeling to me and Laura, in that we are two just kind of Irish actresses leading this HBO massive sci-fi period drama, and we're just like, what is happening? And so Penance and Amalia are facing a similar thing where they're kind of taking on a big mission together in a way too, and going, what is happening? Smaller stakes, but
It also feels like if you actually stripped away all of the sci-fi elements from the show, that it would still be exactly the same show to a degree, because it's still, everything is grounded through real human emotion, real human relationships and connection. And was that a conscious thing that you were all thinking about, or is that just a natural outcome from the scripts and the performances?
I think it might actually be a natural outcome, really. You see, like, the funny thing is, it's when you describe the plot of the show, it nearly is totally disconnected from what the show actually is itself. Because, I remember when I was flying back from, I think, England to Ireland, and the woman in the currency exchange, she goes, you worked on a job with my niece or whatever. How are you now? What are you up to now? And I was like, it's a show about Victorian women with superpowers, and then she went, oh well, it's a job, isn't it? And I went, yeah. But so it's the actual, the heart and soul of the show itself gets lost in the description, I feel like, of the plot. But it's I think what grounds it is there is a larger concept at hand, and it is kind of an experience. Oh God, is that the right way of saying it? It kind of leaves you in an experience rather than just taking you plot by plot point. And I think someone today kind of compared or brought up The Leftovers, that HBO show, The Leftovers, and it deals with like when half the population all of a sudden disappears and there's no explanation for it, and it's just seeing how the world reacts with all this grief left in their hands, this random disappearance. And I feel like our show bleeds a bit of that with it, except it is incredibly entertaining, and it's incredibly fun and definitely action packed, and has all this crazy sci-fi elements, and it is a period piece too. So yeah, it's got a lot of stuff in it, but I feel like when you get down to the particulars, you lose the greater feeling, maybe. So maybe that's where, I suppose, the larger human feelings, cathartic experience comes into play.
And jumping back to working with Laura, I loved the way that you've described how even at the table reads, once you started hearing her iteration and the way that she was inhabiting her character, that started to fill in a lot of the gaps for you with your own character. And so I wanted to ask you what some of those specifics and particulars were that you started to really fill in at that point of the process.
Well, it is very interesting when, I suppose, in my life, and I think maybe lockdown probably showed this even further, is I didn't realize how much of myself develops because of another person or the closest people around me, and how much of yourself feels missing when you don't get that interaction with certain types of people. And so for Penance and Amalia, I felt like a lot of my character was filled in just watching how do I say it, like there's a damagedness about Laura's character, not Laura Donnelly herself, of course, but Amalia. True, there's something in her that is quite hard on herself, unsentimental, and very practical and very driven. And I think Penance sees something in her, and I think from Penance's perspective on this other person, or it's that kind of thing, I suppose, where if the way someone talks about another person tells a lot about them. And I feel like Penance's feelings towards Amalia says a lot about her, because Amalia is not the typical warm BFF you're drawn to. She's kind of hard work sometimes, but the fact that Penance and Amalia can easily come together and kind of blend and find lightness and humor and strive towards a greater thing together, even with entirely different worldviews and life experiences behind them. Penance is very much about the morality and the journey rather than the destination, and Amalia is far more driven for that one goal. And I think that's kind of beautiful in the way that Penance can see all the gorgeous, lovely things that Amalia doesn't even see inside herself. And the best kind of friendships and relationships do that to you. So I think that's what I meant by how much of her and her character and how she acts in scenes informs me. It very much feels like it doesn't feel right that there's one without the other. And yeah.
There's also even that moment in the show where Amalia herself says that she doesn't trust people easily, but Penance is the one person that she trusts, as we see, completely wholeheartedly. And the two of you really beautifully build this intimacy between the two of them, which has only been there for 3 years, but is so deep and so rooted. And within that, I was really interested in how the two of you bring together such an intimate dynamic, but the ways in which you also think about the fact that because they have only known each other for 3 years, there are still aspects of each other that they are learning and sides of each other that maybe they haven't seen before and it's the first time. So how you determined where those spaces would be.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing. Like, we don't see the meeting. We don't get to see that yet. It's something that I do really want to show on camera. I think it would be kind of very interesting the moment they meet and how that comes about. But there's like later on in episodes, I mean episode 6 in particular, there's parts of Amalia she reveals to Penance that Penance didn't even know, and there's like some beautiful moments of these two people getting to know each other even still, and the audience gets to experience some of that, probably like an initial getting to know each otherness, and that thing of like you can never fully know another person, and their relationship as well, though they've been friends for 6 years, I was about to say 3 years. In these 6 episodes, we meet them at a funny point where the sort of mission-y type thing is kicking off. It's all starting to show itself and piece itself bit by bit to different characters, and particularly to Amalia. So it's showing how they're I suppose different parts of themselves are being revealed, and different parts of their nature and character are clashing and melding with each other and benefiting each other. So we do get to see that in a very true way, I think, and which is kind of really interesting because they are just the perfect team nearly, you know, and to see that be tested in a real way was one of my favorite scenes to play.
There's also real emotional intelligence in the way that they're there for the other person. And it feels like each of them very much reads the other person and looks at what do they need from me today? What sort of support or friendship or dynamic do they need? And there's a lot of verbal moments, but also very quiet moments, like when Penance grabs Amalia's hand because she knows that she's nervous without even looking down to see that she's fidgeting, or even just kind of the body language that you have with each other when you're just hanging out, talking, eating chips, you know, that's a different type of it. And so when you're filming a lot of scenes, how much are you looking at what Laura's doing with her character and then using that as a cue for the emotional response for your own performance?
Oh yeah, I mean, me and Laura, we don't discuss, I suppose, very detailed moments bit by bit before we do each scene, but very much when we're there about to film a scene, we do run it through together, and I'll be like, what way are you standing? I'm going to do hands in pockets. Are you going to do hands in pockets? We can't both do hands in pockets, you know, otherwise we'll both be handsing in pockets people. Yeah, we do try to, I suppose, even like something as not shallow, but like basic as that, of like, what way are you leaning? Is kind of, yeah, and that does feed into a deeper thing, I suppose, of like, when, I don't know, do you know what, actually I think it's actually probably quite intuitive between us, like our body languages and stuff like that does just come naturally to me and Laura. Like, we, for that chips eating scene, we just kind of got comfy, and you know, like, it's just about, I think me and Laura are very comfortable together, and like, you know, I've had tea in her house, and you know, met her kids, you know, these kind things like this. So I think it's just kind of easy, thank God, because you know, there are actors out there who, like, they go off to the corner and they listen to their music and they don't want to talk to you, which is entirely fair. But thank God I've got Laura, who actually does want to talk about the greater aspects of the show, and then also those tiny little fiddly moments about hands in pockets.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about Penance's power, because hers specifically, with seeing the movement of electricity and the way that energy flows in the world, I think is really fascinating and says a lot about her as well. So how did you adopt that power into an internal mindset and thinking about the way that that influences and impacts the way that she looks at the world and the way that she moves around other people and other situations?
Well, funny thing is, actually, like, I'm not very scientifically minded myself. I'm definitely a right side of the brain kind of girl. And so I was trying to get into that kind of what it would be like to see, actually see this power and what that would feel like in her. And you know, I I ordered some books off Amazon, like My Little Engineer's First Activity Book, you know, like these kind of things with the flaps and things like that, just to kind of get a basic understanding of like motion, I suppose, like how energy affects an object and how that would affect the space around it, and have some kind of idea about you know, the practicalities of it, like a circuit, trying to understand a circuit. I felt like I was in first year in secondary school again. But yeah, so little things like that helped. And then I read a bit about Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla, like their kind of or biographies and little quotes that they said and nice things like that. And like, I think Albert Einstein had a lovely thing of, he said something about, I don't know if it was genius or science is actually very creative, is a very creative thing, or it's a very you know, you need imagination, I think is what you said, something like that. Sorry, my direct quotes are all over the place, but yeah, so I did try to use that because that's something that I could relate to, and that was something that I could use. But in terms of actually Penance and how that informs her internal world, sorry about that noise, and how that informs Penance's internal world, I did try to bring a kind of electricity, I suppose, to Penance and her energy, although I don't think that's too far removed from myself either. So yeah, I that kind of enthusiasm for things, and optimism.
But that point about bringing in electricity to her energy is really interesting, because she has to be able to think 100 miles a minute and to think very in depth at the same time. Like if you look at the car that she built from scratch, that's a great testament to the fact that, you know, she's built this speedy little car that moves, that really turns corners fast, and had to think about a million things and pieces to pull it together. But at the same time, she also has to really be able to slow her mind down to think very meticulously about a lot of the inner workings and the inner details. And so within those two facets of a mind that moves very fast, but also can be very, very attention focused and detail focused, how did you want to balance out those two disparate juxtapositions?
Well, the funny thing is, like, I mean, Penance, she's a Catholic woman, and so she's very much of her time in that aspect, particularly Irish people of that time. And for her, there is a sense of having second thoughts about something, or she does like to think things through, because she is a morally, you know, she's morally inclined. She's guided by her faith very much, and I think that informs her inventions and the world of her science very much. And so probably that would have been helpful to her, you know, hold on a second, I don't want to, you know, I always say weapons of mass inconvenience rather than destruction. Just like anything to slow someone down or to put them asleep or to knock them out, just not, you know, to kill or to harm or to, you know, maim in any way. So I think she brings, you know, a bit of a moral code to these situations where you can just bulldoze through them, and that's the simple way. But she knows that the path is you know, the journey is more important than just the destination. It does matter how you get there. And so she's inclined, I'd say, by maybe her religious faith to slow down and take a second. But yeah, I do think it's hard for her, because she does love her power, and this, or I call it her power, but most people it's just kind of unusual ability, more so. But this power is, or this ability, shall I say, is not wasted on her. She's someone who wants to use it to the full extent and in the right way. And I think she couldn't have made that car, for example, unless she was incredibly excited about it and could let her mind just go there and race along with it. So.
And one of the things that's so fantastic about the show is that it doesn't rely on effects. Everything that you're seeing has been physically built out, and in particular her workshop. And so what was the experience in stepping onto that, because it's such a huge part of the location, and really just looking at all of the details and all of the minute information in every single corner, and thinking about the fact that she would have touched and handled and developed and built every single aspect of everything that you see in that room.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite days. I think I never thought that this was actually going to happen and be real until I stepped foot in Penance's workshop. I remember we walked there, we walked in onto that set, and they said it was the biggest set in the studios, and it's like four walls. It's like a proper room, you know. And all this, it's like stepping into Penance's mind, all her sketches on the wall of inventions that we see throughout the show, little bits and bobs, even the tiny cogs from watches, like pocket watches, scattered around the place. And just, it's actually quite brilliant how they've done it. Like, it looks like there's tons of half-finished ideas everywhere that she just doesn't have enough arms to get to. But there's also really beautiful details. Like, I think I might have welled up a little bit when they were like, there's a door for Primrose the giant, like they've even made that. And I was like, oh, that's, you know, that Penance asked for that, you know, she just wants to include everyone and make a workshop a comfortable space for these women to hang out and help, and give them a purpose if they wanted to help out with Penance or spend some time with her and things like that. So yeah, that was a really mind-blowing experience. I felt very proud, as if I made it myself and I had no involvement, which is terrible, but I feel like a kind of an ownership over it, like a cat who's just peed on a bush.
I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the period aspect and the aspects of that allows you to bring into your performance as well, because, you know, I think one of the interesting things about any period piece, and particularly playing women, is the fact that there was a certain way that women had to behave, particularly in public. So in essence, it almost means you have the ability to develop two sides of a character, who they are behind closed doors and who they have to be in society. But also within society, it also allows a lot of space for subtext, because you have to be able to bring forth the internal journey and everything that they can't say out loud and that they can't show on their faces. You still have to somehow be able to convey that in your performance. And so I wanted to ask about the way in which you set about trying to do all of that.
Oh, that's a brilliant question, because I've definitely felt like Penance, for example, she'd be like a kind of a working class Irish immigrant in London during the time when the British Empire had Ireland as a colony still. And so it was a funny thing in my head. I always was very conscious of that, though the show doesn't allude to it too much or anything. So it's a funny thing to try find your place in this society. You know, in the say, for example, like when Penance and Amalia get invited to the opera, and you're standing there and you're like, my character is this incredibly intelligent, like inventor, genius, absolutely, you know, brilliant woman, hilarious, she's all the rest. And then she goes into this environment with these quite elite, the upper class, and doesn't know how to be, you know, doesn't say much, is kind of impressed that Amalia's taken the reins a bit on the conversation, doesn't know what to curtsy or not, you know, it feels awkward to be there. It doesn't, I you know, I hope to feel that kind of, I hope that comes across, that kind of embarrassment and awkwardness. And then it's totally different when she's in her workshop. She's like, the sleeves are all up, she's washing her armpits, she's like bada bing bada boom, whatever. So like yeah, it is a fascinating thing, and I've actually never thought about it as much as I have then making this show. It's been very cathartic, I suppose, to put yourselves in the shoes of these women, because I always thought practically it would have been a nightmare to be back in Victorian times or nearly any point in history for a woman, and to actually then understand that you're not only hindered practically, whether it's the clothes or bloody childbirth or being married off to someone, you're also devoiced, and you're also nothing's expected of you. And I suppose that film Little Women, or that book as well, touches on it, of you know, women have hearts and they have minds. And I think, you know, David Lynch says something that I really like, is in that Twin Peaks, you know, behind the scenes, and they're telling him, you only have one day to film this, you know, in this location. And he's like, what? No, I hate this. I don't want to work like this. You know, I want to dream up all kinds of crazy stuff. You know, I want a room, you know, room to be able to dream. And I feel that with my character, and I would feel like that back then too. And I don't know how I would have functioned. I don't know if I'm, you know, being down on myself here, or I'm, you know, I just have incredible admiration for any woman who's ever come before me. You know, it kind of blows me away. And then if we're looking at that in other aspects of the world, in different cultures and societies, and all the different kinds of people that are actually just experiencing that right now, it's an eye-opener. And I love that about acting and art in general. I suppose you're able to experience life, someone else's life, that you wouldn't want to experience in real life, but you can dip your toe in a bit and get that shock and that punch, and understand that these people are going through this every single day. And I think it's really exciting where TV is going and films are going at the moment, because we're getting so much more of that, where we've been, as audiences, totally deprived of this greater worldview and greater immersion into what life actually is for everyone else. You know, sorry, I went on a ramble there.
No, it's really brilliant. And I think it says so much that the entire crux of the show is centered around you and Laura, and your performances have been so phenomenal to watch in the episodes that I've seen so far. And I can't wait to watch the rest. And thank you so much, Anne.
Thank you very much. Cheers. God, you've left me with a lot to think about. I need to make some notes.